Welcome to a Parthian Films blabbercast. Parthian Films, in cooperation with the Snake River Theatrical Plagiarists Guild, is pleased to present the story of the 1927 Plum It Series. This tale is a part of the yet-to-be-released third installment of your Snake River Skirr travel guidebook. Purvis takes a vacation. Purvis Spikes the bootlegger, Ba his apprentice, GB the dog, and Sally the mule had settled into a pleasant routine. 6 days a week they made booze. 7 days a week Snake Riverians drank booze. On Sundays the foursome slowed down. The one chore they felt obliged to do was completed first thing in the morning. They liked to get the obligation out of the way. On these lazy Sunday mornings, they read from the Bible, and it was a brief experience. For the most part, it was the one day of the week they took the afternoon off. If need be, they would clean or do some maintenance on the still, but generally the day was set aside to rest. Sally the mule spent most every Sunday afternoon sleeping and eating. Purvis, Ba, and GB were not opposed to a nap. It was just that the mule practically refused to do anything else. While Sally caught up on her beauty sleep, Purvis, Ba, and the dog would often go fishing. They had plenty to eat, so the exercise was more for leisure than necessity. They read adventure books, smoked, and generally lazed about, enjoying the self-satisfaction after a week of hard work. More than any other time, the master moonshiner and his apprentice would talk. One day, a question arose like an odd leaf blowing into their encampment. Purvis and Ba had just been reading the Jules Verne classic, Mysterious Island. Ba had never seen the ocean, and Purvis was trying to tell the lad about his days in Charleston, South Carolina. He was doing his best to describe salt water and the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. Then the question came. The waif turned his eyes to his mentor. "Mr. Spikes, sir, have you ever thought about taking a vacation and going home?" The bootlegger snorted. "Nah, boy, I am home." With that statement, he reached over and ruffled Ba's hair. It was one of the few acts of physical affection exchanged between the two. The act's rarity made the boy appreciate the contact that much more. As Ba reveled in the affection and the happiness that his new home facilitated, Purvis Spikes began to ponder. He broke this reflective silence that had engulfed the moment. "You know, Ba, when I was with Stonewall, I couldn't wait for leave. Any time we had away was like gold. We'd all hightail it to the nearest town and spend the entire time drinking, whoring, and fighting. The drinking and whoring made sense, but the fighting..." Spikes paused at the memory and shook his head. With Ba's attention fully engaged, the bootlegger continued. "Here we were, up to our necks in the most vicious combat you can imagine. And how do we take our relief from hell? Right back at it, man on man, Of our brothers, no less. Nope, I've no desire to return to those haunts. But you perk something in my soul, boy. I love this new land, and I haven't seen but a speck of it. Now and then I wonder what lay beyond our forest. I wonder. Ba and Spikes were sitting around a fire, both leaning back against a familiar log. Then Spikes sat up. Let's pretend I did go, boy. What would you think? Say I took a week off and went off on my own. Ba was startled. As was his nature, his tears began to well up. Spikes generated a rare grin, attempting to ease the lad's trepidation. Now I can bet I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna blabber and yelp. Mr. Spike, sir, I don't know if I can handle it. Well, let me stop you right there. I keep an eye on you. And I say you do just fine. The child recoiled at the thought. Purvis teased the boy. When I lie to you, do you think old Purvis is telling tall tales? No, sir. Good, 'cause I'm telling you, you do just fine. We could lay in some stock, get ahead of the game, while we could give old Mally notice, and that would be that. And that was indeed that. Purvis had made up his mind. He was going on a vacation. Over the next few weeks, the waif and the bootlegger began to put their plan into action. They got ahead of the orders, and soon had built up a stockpile of booze. As the idea headed towards reality, Spikes noted something odd. Ba was the one that suggested the idea, but it seemed as if he had some reservations about the concept. The moonshiner was confused. The campfire discussions began slowly. Sir, why do you want to go on a vacation? Spikes didn't want to admit it, but he really wanted some time alone. He had realized he had come to Snake River to get away from everyone. The Civil War had left him with a sense of disgust over how humans could treat each other. The more the thought rumbled through his brain, the more he felt like he deserved the break, and he knew enough not to tell Boy about his low opinion of mankind. Boy, I want to go hunting. Maybe I'd like to bag a moose. I never have. That'd be some good eating, eh, boy? But, sir, O'Malley serves moose at least once a week. Well, perhaps I'd just like to bag one myself. The truth was, Spikes had no intention to hunt. He swore to himself he would never kill another living creature. He felt bad about the lie. A few days later, the conversation was a similar one. Sir, I'm worried about your trip. What's the problem, boy? I'm worried about old Sal. Spikes waited, and eventually the waif continued. That old mule has a mind of her own, and you are the only one she listens to. If she got it in her mind, she could take advantage of your being away. Well, sir, I just don't know if I could handle her. The next day, Spikes made Ba make the delivery on his own. Sally the mule cooperated fully, and without dispute. There you go, Ba. That old mule just aims to please. Yes, sir, you were right. The next night, Ba made another suggestion. Sir, what if some folks in Cold Rapid get the word that I will be all alone at the still? What if they use the opportunity to rob us? It could be dangerous. Although the suggestion of a cold rapids raid seemed improbable, Spikes made arrangements. Old Crow would drop in on the lad, and if need be, he could spend the night. Although Old Crow and the waif were fast friends, this did not seem to alleviate the child's concern. The night after, it was the same thing. The bootleggers were sitting around the fire, as they usually did. Spikes was whittling on a stick, as the boy was fumbling with a rope. The waif was simpering. Spikes could take it no longer. "What's in your craw, boy? What is it? What are you thinking?"
"Sir, I was just looking ahead, sir. What if those cold, rapid criminals hear tell of Old Crow sleeping out here? Sir, would that not put the feed and seed in some jeopardy?"
Spikes got angry. He knew he was mainly mad at himself. He was not being straightforward with the lad about his desire to spend some time alone.
"Ma, I'm tired of hearing your complaining. I swear you ain't telling me the truth. The feeding seed ain't getting robbed. It don't make no sense. You don't make no sense. So quit your blubbering and quit your lying. Why won't you let me go?"
The boy raised his head and faced the bootlegger. His big brown eyes were filled with tears.
"Tell me now, boy, why can't I go?"
The young lad leapt up and jumped over the fire. The bootlegger was always on guard. Somewhere in his psyche he was always prepared for an attack. The thin waif grabbed Spikes around his waist and held on tight.
"The truth is, sir, I'm worried for you. What if you break through some ice? What if you get caught in a mislaid bear trap? You could get tracked by wolves. Sir, the truth is, I love you."
The hard-edged bootlegger buckled at the notion.
"Sir, you are the only one to ever show me kindness. You are the only one, sir. If you never came back..."
The child was overtaken by sorrow and began to bawl. There, son." It was the first time Spikes had described the waif that way. It was the first time he had called him son. In his heart, he knew he loved his son. He was a son himself, and the image of his mother came to mind. Spikes remembered the last time she said she had loved him. He began to do an inventory. He wondered how many people had told him they loved him. There was a whore in Martinsburg. She used the expression, but she was high on opium. He wondered why he could not remember her name. The boy's wailing brought him back to the present moment. There, son. Listen up now. I was at Chickamauga, Shiloh, the Second Bull Run. I seen near 30,000 men fall all around me. But old Purvis, I got out without a scratch. So no ice, no bar traps, or no wolf was going to get old Purvis. The child looked up at the bootlegger.
"You called me son."
"Yeah, boy, I did. And tell you what now." Purvis took Bob by the shoulders, sat down, and placed the child sitting in his lap. "How's about this? As much as I hate those city slickers, how's about tomorrow morning, after our delivery, how's about we both go over to City Hall? We get some fancy-pants lawyers to start a process where I can formally adopt you. What do you say, son?" The boy was firm.
"I don't need no fancy paper."
"Thank you, son. So how's about we just swear an oath to each other, and the only witness will be them stars, that dog, and that old mule." Bob and the bootlegger scanned the scene
Both GB and Sal were paying attention. The boy looked to the stars. That would seem right proper, sir, considering our situation. Fine then. We don't need no fancy words, but we both have an understanding. Silently, the two shook hands and nodded. So how's about this then? It ain't nobody else's business, but how's about when it's just you and me around? You can call me Pa, and I'll keep calling you son. I'm proud of you, boy. You're a fine person, finer than I'll ever be. Again the child shot back. No, sir, you're a fine man, the finest I've ever seen. What'd you call me? Ba was slow to answer. Pa. That's right. So if you listen to your old pa now, I says you got nothing to worry about. Old Purvis will go hunting, and his son Ba will mind the shop. The calloused hands of the bootlegger wiped a tear off the child's cheek. You ain't scared, are you? I ain't raising no chicken now, am I, son? You ain't no chicken, are you? Then Purvis prodded the child and clucked like a chicken. I don't see no feathers. The boy finally smiled. I ain't no chicken. Good then, it's settled. Now I gots me a human child to rear. My son Ba. The two hugged. GB, the dog, jumped up and barked and ran like a pup around the bootlegger and his newly adopted son. Spikes reached out to pet the hyper dog. Nope, we haven't forgot about you, GB, you old egg sucker. Now let's make sure we got all our plans together. Tell you what, if it helps set your mind to ease, how about I take GB along with me? Any of them wolves out there just better watch it. That night, tucked into his sleeping pallet, the boy prayed to God earnestly for the first time ever. He just wanted to thank him. Two days later, Purvis Spikes stood in the front of Ba, an old crow. Strapped to his back was a large backpack and a rifle. Okay now, fellers, I best be off. He looked directly at Ba. Is there anything I gots to worry about? No, sir. If old Crow gets out of hand, I'll take him out to the woodshed and set him straight. All three present laughed out loud. It was the first time Ba had told a joke. Well then, I'll be off. See you in about a week. Ba then crossed the space and held out his hand to the bootlegger. Now there'll be none of that. He leaned over and hugged the child and gave him a kiss on the cheek. The child whispered into the ear of the bootlegger. See you in a week, Pa. Nothing else was said. Old Crow took off his hat and just nodded approval to the bootlegger. Come on then, GB. It took Purvis and the dog about 3 hours to clear the dense trees of the Hurton forest and reach the Great Plains. Purvis, Spikes, and GB stood at the edge of the Hurton forest, staring out at a wide, flat plain covered in snow. The sun was low and glistened off the crystals before them. It reminded Purvis of the first time he saw the ocean. The expanse was overwhelming. You know what, GB? We'll have to bring Ba out here someday. I expect he'd be a mite impressed. The dog looked up at Spikes and waited for more of the story. The wind blew and sent a chill up Purvis's spine.
It's lifeless, GB. Purvis had experienced fields of active death, both in Shiloh, Chickamauga, and Bull Run. He also remembered a day in the Florida Everglades. On a low, wide pond, there was a gathering of thousands of birds. They chirped and squawked a deafening drone. He remembered thinking he'd never seen so much life. In all his years, he thought he'd seen it all. But this field before him was a new vision. Lifeless, he said again to his dog. More than death, it's like life has never been here. GB snorted, scratched his nose with his front leg. Never seen such a thing, GB. As close as I can recall was a day in Shiloh. I thought I was in the shadow of the valley of death. Here, there ain't no shadow to be seen. Now I got the queerest notion. As fantastic as this vision portrays, it seems like it ain't nothing if I can't share it. The bootlegger scratched his chin and considered his current situation. Can you keep a secret, GB? GB, if he could speak English, would have said, I'm a dog. Who the hell am I going to tell? Purvis still checked the dog and took some time to get to his confession. I miss Ba. The two stared once more at the white, lifeless plain. Part of me says we should turn around now and fetch the boy here. But the other part says he'd be a mite disappointed. I told him I'd be gone for a week, and he steeled himself to the idea. The boy might think I returned on account of my being worried about him. He may conclude that I didn't trust him running the still. I gotta be a man of my word. Who knows? If we turned back now, the boy may be scared to go on his own adventures. I don't want to raise no mama's boy. Do we, GB? The dog just stared back. Well, we ain't waiting for the train. We might as well start to a walking. The dog understood the word walk and started to wag his tail. Purvis was a quiet sort by nature. Now he was talking a blue streak. GB felt he needed to be with his owner and fell into pace walking beside the bootlegger. You know, GB, I came here to this God-forsaken country to be alone. During the war, I heard a lot of high talk about God. God was on our side, I was told. I heard them peckerhead Yanks say the same thing. God was on their side. If you believed any of 'em, apparently God was thick as fleas in them fields. What does it say in the Bible, GB? If God be for us, who could be agin us? After Shiloh, I just wanted to come someplace God might have just have forgotten about. Looks like you forgot about this place. How many times I said I didn't want to spend any time with my fellow mankind. Kind. I ain't seen much of it in man. And I'll tell you this, GB. There was a time at Shiloh where I was covered in a mass of humanity, and I hated each and every one of them. They were my brothers, mind you, and I cursed each soul. You see, them Yanks were rolling in, and Beauregard had sounded the retreat, but about a half dozen of us never heard the call. We got caught out in an opening, and we had but one small pile of stones to hide behind. It had been a wall, but them Yanks had torn it apart with their artillery. And here we were, maybe 6 of us trying to take cover where there weren't enough cover to take. We were low on powder. Hell, we were low on everything. Low to the ground I was. The snow crunched under their feet.
and the dog listened intently. The shots were whistling over our heads like a storm of bees, and these boys, piled up behind me, with just a few rocks between us and the Yanks, they were crying like pups and crawling all over me worse than lice. I was on the bottom with my face pressed up against the rock wall, and I just kept praying my boys would shut up. Well, one by one, they all went quiet. I'd hear a volley, then that sickening thud of a ball hitting flesh. There'd be a yelp or a scream, and one boy'd go quiet. The boy right above me, well, when his time came, he emitted this woof sound. I could feel the air was just knocked out of him, and his spirit gone with it. Before too long, they were all quiet, all dead. And there I was, still breathing, smothered in dead rebs. Mostly boys covering old Purvis like a big gray and red spotted blanket. I heard them Yanks roll right on past me. They never paid old Purvis no never mind. To those Yanks, we might as well have been a pile of cordwood. So I had to wait, be quiet, and make sure them Yanks had truly moved on. The waiting and the quiet near drove me mad. The battle had moved on, and I could hear the sound of rifles fading off in the distance. The rifles growing quiet just like them boys. Got to the point where I just wanted to die. I closed my eyes, and I was right prepared to let go, just let it all slip away. And I think I was dead for a moment. I was just so damn tired. And you know what, GB? I think I dreamt of this place, all white and peaceful, damn cold just like here. And I might have just fell away, but then I heard a ting, tang, ting. A little bell was ringing, slow and clear. It was a tiny sound, but it cut through that damn quiet like a knife. I thought about my mama. She didn't have nothing, as we was dirt poor. But she had this little bell. It was her only cherished possession, and she loved that bell. She would tinkle it just at prayer time and before every meal. I hadn't heard that bell ring in years. I opened my eyes, and there right before me was my mama. Now, she had passed years ago, but there she was, as clear as anything, and she was mad. She barked at me not to give up. She told me she never raised no quitters. I know it don't make no sense, but as I say, I was some kind of mad. I had to get out. Ting, ting, ting went that bell, and I wanted out of there right quick, out of that goddamn pile, away from them dead boys, just away from everything. But those boys were waiting. It took a bit of a fight. Purvis shook his head at the memory. I must have made quite a sight, crawling out of that pile of boys. Well, JB, now here I am, in the land I dreamt of all those years ago. And you know what, GB? I don't like it. That time, in that Tennessee field, it seemed like a place like this would be heaven. Looking back, I was truly forsaken and forgotten. The dog hung his head low. Oh, come on there, GB. I didn't mean nothing. I'm just an old man flapping his gums. I never meant nothing about you. In fact, if you weren't here, I don't know what I'd do. The bootlegger stooped down and scratched the dog behind his ears. GB picked up. The two walked on in silence.
It took them about 4 hours before they came across a dip in the flat prairie. The land had been dug out over time by the patience of a small creek. There was an opening in the ice where the water flowed fast. A few saplings broke up the landscape. "Looks like as good a spot as any to bed for the night." GB's hair then bristled up, and he began to pace back and forth around the edge of the creek, with his nose testing the snow. Purvis thought the dog was tracking a mouse or a mole. All of a sudden, the dog started to dig furiously at a deeper drift. He paid the dog no more mind as he scanned the site, trying to determine where to pitch his tent. Then there was that sound, a metallic tinkle. Ting, ting, ting. Then he saw the dog had dug up a strip of red material, something like felt, with a little bell attached. Then it became clear. GB was digging up a corpse. A very big corpse. "Jesus Christ, GB, stop it!" The dog kept at it, and the sound continued. Ting, ting, ting. It all came back to him, that horrible day back in Tennessee. He knew now that ting, ting, ting sound was not his mother's bell. It was the sound of lifeblood dripping out of one of those boys. The blood was leaving a boy and hitting a tin canteen, a death toll if ever there was one. That sound marked the end of the days for one of those boys. Purvis fell to his knees, and for the first time ever, he wept for those boys who covered him that day. GB kept digging at the snow around the corpse. Purvis Spikes finally gathered himself and stood. "That's enough there, GB. Let's see what we got." GB stopped the exhuming and began to lick the man's face. As Purvis slowly approached the scene, he heard a cough, as clear as day. He was sure this man was dead, but this cough proved otherwise. He knelt down and pushed the hound out of the way. Then there was a puff of condensation as the man exhaled. With GB's help, he quickly uncovered the man and sat him up. Another breath. His chest moved. The man was alive, just barely, but alive nonetheless. Purvis built a fire and propped up the ghost as close to the blaze as safety would allow. Then he waited. He thought of that pile of boys. Even though he was hunched over, Purvis knew this man was huge. He had to be at least 7 feet tall. He was dressed in a most unusual manner. It seemed every color in the rainbow was alive somewhere on his attire. His hat had bells on the peak. Those bells were the origins of that haunting sound. As soon as he put the word in his mind, Purvis knew he had to tell the dog. "GB, this here fella's a clown."